Hello everyone, I'm here today to do my March wrap-up, and I read 13 books in March, which I think is pretty good, and I just wanted to go through them. A lot of it's a Women's Prize for Non-Fiction, but I'm enjoying the prize, so I have no complaints about that. So the first book that I read was Indignity by Lea Ypi, and this is a non-fiction-ish book. So the author goes through trying to research her grandmother's life, and her grandmother was in Albania in the 1940s, around the war, and her father was one of the first prime ministers, I think. So we try to go through her life and see how it was for her. All of these changes, the communist regime, all of that, but it's written in a way that it has snippets of the actual archives, and then the author kind of reimagines her life based on those, so it has a lot of fiction-ish parts to it, let's say. I liked it. I thought the narrative style and the narrative choices were very interesting and quite engaging, but I also think that took away a little bit from the from how accurate the book was in its story, and also the end is a little bit anticlimactic, so yeah, good things, but also not a perfect book. The next book that I finished in March is The Art Cure by DaisyFrancourt, another Women's Prize for Non-Fiction, and this is like a look from the psychology point of view of how art affects people and how it can improve their health and any other conditions that they might have, not cure but help, if we engage in art. And that could be watching a movie, reading a book, but also could be like doing a small painting. It doesn't have to be perfect. It also has a strong call to regain our hobbies. You don't have to be good at something to enjoy it and to do it. So yeah, that's kind of like the premise of the book. I thought it had some good points, but I think it also it also overestimated a little bit how much, like, the isolation of the parameters was not the best in my opinion, because she says, for example, that art can have a similar effect as exercise in your life. So it doesn't mean that it's gonna cure cancer, but it means that overall you might be healthier and have a slightly lower chance of certain diseases if you engage with art. But at the same time, they put the example at some point of how dancing can have those benefits, but dancing is also, like, it has a sport aspect to it, and I don't think those were separated. They just, like, the whole benefit of dancing was attributed to art, rather than saying, okay, it also has a sport element to it, so maybe that has to be taken into account. So yeah, it didn't feel as rigorous as it could be, but I think the overall point still stands, and I think it's still an interesting premise to think of art as we think of sport. The next book that I read for the Women's Prize for Non-Fiction was The Genius of Trees by Harriet Rix, and this kind of goes through all the different ways in which trees shape the environment they live in. So it is divided in sections: tree shaping water, tree shaping soil, tree shaping fire, tree shaping air. You get the gist. And it just basically is about that, like how, for example, having the roots of the trees in a place will allow for water to be retained in certain areas so that it doesn't become a desert, things like that, which was fine, but it was not groundbreaking, and I think the narrative of it was sometimes a little bit boring. So yeah, it's one of those books that it just feels like any other tree book that I ever read. So yeah, it was fine. It was fine. The next book I read for my read good challenge. So I have a separate review for it, but it's Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie. And this is about, basically there is this couple that is presented at the beginning of the book, and the girl asks her best friend for help getting employment for her boyfriend. And then we fast forward a year or so, and the friend is married to the guy, and this other girl is chasing them around because she's not very happy about it. And then at some point there is a murder. It happens around like halfway through the book, and for the first half of the book there was a sort of a mystery, because you know that someone is gonna be killed, and it's not, I mean, there is an obvious person, but it's not always completely clear. It makes you second guess if it's going to be the person or not. And then yeah, the mystery, the typical Agatha Christie mystery happens. So they are all in a boat, and there's all these people, and you go through all of the possible motives of all the people in the boat, and all of the possible alibis of all the people in the boat, and then at the end you get the reveal of what happened. I think this one was not, like, the twist was not super surprising, but I still enjoyed it, trying to put the puzzle together. The next book that I read is We Are Light by Gerda Bless. This was a very interesting book. So the beginning of the book we met these three people that live sort of in a commune flat situation, and their premise is that they think they don't need to eat to survive. They think they can get all their energy from the sun, and so they occasionally eat, but it's not something they do for nourishment. It's something they do for fun, let's say. And that is a real concept that exists, that some people follow. And at the beginning of the book, there were 4 people in this commune, and at the beginning of the book we learned that one of them died, and we kind of follow the investigation of what happened and the motivations behind these people. The most interesting thing for me is that it's told in every chapter is told from the perspective of something different, and it's always starting like we are, and that thing, like we are the people in the flat, we are the parents, but then it gets weirder and weirder, like we are consciousness, we are light, we are the juice maker, we are the kitchen, you know, and it kind of, each of the elements plays a role in the overall story, and I think that was a very interesting way to tell the story. I think some of the chapters were better than others. I think that some of the chapters like forgot about the concept halfway through, but I think it was an interesting concept, and having the whole picture now, I think I would want to reread this one to be able to get all of the different elements that I might have missed at the beginning. So I think this was a success for me. Then the next book I read in audio, and was The Nights Are Quiet in Teheran by Shida Bazyar. And this is about a couple of Iranian people that left Iran because of the revolution and what might happen, and they were always kind of halfway there, halfway here, and it follows both the politics of Iran but also how that affected the diaspora of Iran, and how that shaped who they were. And these particular people were in Berlin, and they all, I don't know if it was Berlin, it was Germany, and these people also talk about how difficult it was to integrate with the German culture, and how difficult they found, especially at the beginning, to understand the social norms, and how eventually they made friends. It was fine. It was I think it is a very typical refugee or like immigrant story, and I enjoyed it enough, and I think it's important also to learn about the history of Iran right now. I knew a lot of the things because I have Iranian friends, and I have consumed other Iranian media and books, but I think if you haven't never done that, this might be a good introduction to Iranian culture and diaspora. The next book that I read was The Left Hand of Darkness by Úrsula K. Guin. And this basically is about this, I think it's two guys that arrive to this world in which people don't have genders. It's kind of, they're genderless until they come to like mating season, and then they adopt a gender, and it's not up to them, it's kind of like their body does it. And when someone is a gender, then the mating partner will adjust their gender to be the opposite to that person. And then these people that just arrived there are kind of almost researching these people and how they came to be like that, and how their culture works. There's not a big plot about it, it's just more of a wandering around the world kind of story. And I enjoyed it enough, but I find Ursula K. Le Guin's writing very dry. I have read, I think this is my third book by her, and I love her concepts, but her writing feels very dry to me and very difficult to get through. So yeah, I like the concepts more than I like the books. The next book that I finished is Flashlight by Susan Choi, and this follows a girl. It follows kind of like a family. So the father is of Korean descent, but he lived in Japan during Korean War, like when they separated themselves. He decided to stay in Japan, and Korean people in Japan are very stigmatized. And then eventually he goes to America and has a daughter, and kind of like the daughter is trying to understand her father, and it's about that multicultural environment that that is created when people immigrate from one place to another, and then again and again. I think it was well done. I don't think it's one book that is going to stay with me forever, but I think it was well done. The story was engaging, and the characters were very well built, so I enjoyed it enough while I was reading. The next book that I finished, which I also finished for the Read Good Challenge, so I will recommend checking that out, is Nadie, escribe, cartas by Jang Eun Jin, and this translates to Nobody Writes Letters Anymore. And it's basically about this man that has decided something happened in his life, and then decided that he was going to just travel around motels for 2 years writing letters to the people that he met. And he says, I will finish my travel once I get a response from someone. And in the meantime, he meets this old woman that decides to join him in this trip, and he also has his dog, who was the guide dog of his grandfather, that also travels with him. And we basically see these people just like traveling around and having philosophical conversations about life. And I thought it was very nothing until the end. Then the end, a lot of things happen at the end that clarify a lot of what this book is about and what it's trying to say. And I found that somewhat powerful, but I'm not sure that it was worth the rest of the book, if that makes sense. So yeah, I enjoyed it, but it's not... I enjoyed the ending, but the middle was a little bit slow. Then the next one I also read in audio, and it's Paradiso 17 by Hannah Lillith Assadi. And this is about a man from Palestine that had to leave Palestine because of war, obviously, and I think he moved to America, and then he built a life there, but there was a lot of things that he didn't completely understand and didn't completely get used to in his travels. He went to Italy first, and then he went to America, and yeah, the way that he interacted with people he realized was not the same as he could do when he was in Palestine, and that was heavy on his heart. And also the fact that Palestine is an occupied territory, and all the things that are happening in Palestine. And we also see him building a family, and the person that he fell in love was an Israeli woman, which it was interesting, but they made it work. And I think that the book could have gone deeper into that relationship and how that was. I don't think that was developed enough, And yeah, again, another immigrant story that it's very similar to The Nights in Teheran and the Flashlight one. They are all about people trying to adapt to cultures that are not their own, and also at the same time being worried about the people that they left behind because their countries are not safe, which are important stories to tell, but they fail a little bit samey if they don't have enough depth about them. Then the next book that I read was Last Night in Montreal by Emily St. John Mandel, and this was fine. I read this for my book club, and I honestly, it's one of those books that I don't think I remember anything anymore, and I read it like 2 weeks ago. This girl that cannot remember her childhood is kind of like she was abducted or something, and then we kind of follow her and the people around her and the search for who she is. But it's, yeah, nothing. It's like nothing to me. I think if I didn't have to read it for book club, I would have DNF, to be honest. The next book that I read was The Wax Child by Olga Ravn, and this is about a couple of women in the, I think, 1600s, yeah, 1620, a few women that were accused of witchcraft, and what they actually did to be accused of witchcraft and what happened to them. It's a very short book, and I think it was well executed. I really love Olga Ravn's writing style, but yeah, I think the story was well written and it had a message about how, like, yeah, one of the people were accused of witchcraft because she helped other women, basically. So you can imagine it's not exactly like, yeah, it has a feminist take on it, of course, but yeah, I don't think the message itself was strong enough. That's the one thing that I miss from this book, but I think, yeah, Olga Ravn is a very good writer, and I will read whatever she writes. Then the next book and last book that I finished was Mother Mary Comes to Me by Arundhati Roy, which I also read for the Women's Prize for Nonfiction, and this is her memoir. And Arundhati Roy is an excellent writer. Like, the writing style of this is amazing. The evocation of the writing is amazing, and she had a really amazing life as well, a very interesting life. But I think this focuses a lot on the relationship with her mother, and I think that Arundhati Roy has not fully processed how she feels about her mother, so in that sense this book felt a little bit messy, because her mother was a very polarizing character. She did a lot of good things. She was a fighter and an activist in a way, but she was also very self-centered and very narcissistic, it seems. So being her daughter was hard, even though she would also could recognize the good things that her mom was doing. And I think in this book she goes through her feelings more than she goes about the facts of what her mother did and did not do, and that meant that we didn't have enough context for her feelings, and I think that if she would have written this maybe a few years in the future, she might have processed that a little bit better, and this book would be a bit more organized or like full. But still, very good book, and I'm glad I read it. I think it became better at the end, because I probably, she was processing things while she was writing this, and at the end she kind of arrived to a conclusion of how she felt about her mother. But yeah, I think if she needed this to process the feelings, but I would prefer to read the next thing that she writes when she has already processed the feeling, if that makes sense. So those are all the books that I have finished in March. I also had a couple of DNFs, which is unlike me, but it happened. So the first one that I DNF is Tale of the Dreamer's Son by Prita Samarasan, which is a beautiful book, and I wish I liked it, but I read the first 100 pages of this and I realized I was not retaining anything. This was not talking to me. I was bored when I was reading it, and I was like, yeah, okay, I'm not going to read another 400 pages of this, so I DNF'd it. Maybe it's good. I think it's probably good for some people, but it's just not my kind of story. And then the other one that I read and DNF was Abyss Links Towards Beijing by Alice Evelyn Yang. This is also a fairly long book. I was doing the audiobook, and the audiobook is like 13 hours. And the reason I DNF'd this one is because I was not very far in. I think I was like 10% in, so like a couple of hours. And basically it opens with this girl. She kind of sees a man coming around, and it seems to be her grandfather. They are from Chinese descent, but they are in America, and it again felt about like this very standard immigrant story that I have read several times this month. So I just thought I didn't want to read it again, and I DNF'd it. That's all I have to say about that one. But yeah, I think overall a quite successful month. I did read a lot, and I did enjoy quite a few of the books, so I'm happy about that. And that's all for me. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts in any of the books I talked about, and until next video, bye.